afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's session on electronics component manufacturing scheme, which we are organizing under the aegis of FICCI Electronics Committee. And this is being organized in collaboration with Dhruva Advisors. We are joined by Mr. Manish Sharma, Chair of FICCI Electronics and White Goods Manufacturing Committee and Chairman Panasonic Life Solutions. We also have with us Mr. Ranjit Mehtani, Partner Dhruva Advisors, Mr. Anand, Associate Partner, and Mr. Ruturaj Bhire, Principal from Dhruva Advisors, who will be taking us through the scheme and the guidelines. But before we dive into the details, I'll request Mr. Manish Sharma for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Purtika, and thank you everyone for sparing your time. I'm sure this session in specific, the presentation done by Dhruva Advisors will precipitate and reflect a lot of insights. Needless to say, I believe this is the most opportune time for us to have this policy, this scheme, this allocation for the industry coming up. I'm sure everybody would agree if you look back, say the decade gone by, and quite often is the case that when you look back in time, you can either challenge what has happened, or you can be critical about it, or you can appreciate it. But one thing is for sure that there seems to be a methodical approach, and during 2014-15, when MSIPs got revised, CAPEX subsidies came into existence, which was the need of the hour then, and subsequently PMP, which was phased manufacturing program to help create better visibility for industry to plan their investments. And while economies of scale continued to happen, PLIs came into existence, which catalyzed this whole process. And in many sectors, that has already happened. And this essentially got coupled with another reason which is continuing to aggregate the demand, is that as we know that electronics in a very large manner has started to cut into various applications. While it largely was restricted to IT and to consumer electronics, but into power sector, into medical, into telecom, it has started to cut across. And then the situation now is such that with the industry's consistent effort, not necessarily banking on any policy intervention, largely the population of PCB boards have started in the country in a very large manner. While industry has to still cover a distance, non-mobile PCB imports still continue to be in excess of $5 to $6 billion. But consistent investment in terms of populating these boards, and why this is very critical, because only when you populate the boards in the country, you know what is coming in an exploded bill of material manner. So I think the visibility is much more. We are in a better position to know that which are those components, including the boards and their variety, to be looking at making such investments with this huge impetus in the form of electronics component scheme coming in at the right time, as I mentioned. So I think this is a good opportunity, and I'm thankful to Dhruva Advisors for putting this this analysis and this report, which I'm sure is going to precipitate insights. And once the presentation is over, I will welcome members to ask any question if at all further clarification is needed on this. So I compliment and thank taking this opportunity on behalf of the entire electronics industry, on behalf of FICCI's Electronics Manufacturing Committee. I thank the government for this very timely intervention. I'm sure industry will reciprocate this with fast actions and ensure that we expand on the local value addition, which is much required for our country. Thank you, Purtika. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your remarks. As you rightly said that, electronics is now cutting across all the sectors. So we have representation from all the sectors today, whether it's EV, mobile, or capital goods, everyone is present in the meeting today. So that shows the interest, in the segment as well as into the scheme. So now I'll request Mr. Ranjit Mehtani from Dhruva Advisors to please take us through the details.
Thank you, Purtika. First, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to FICCI, the Electronic Committee here, to have us on board to make this presentation on the electronic component manufacturing scheme. Just taking off from what Manish just mentioned, that there is a timely sort of intervention from the side of the government, and now in response, industry and trade will have to come in and put its effort and initiative into it to make this particular scheme a resounding success. Just couple of opening points, and then I will have my colleagues Rituraj and Anand walk us through the scheme, including the operational guidelines, and we'll also be happy to take on some questions and answers at the end of the session. But India's electronic sector, the manufacturing grew from 48 billion US in FY 2017 to 101 billion US in FY 23. And the targets that we have for FY 26 are quite steep and quite ambitious. But in sort of making those ambitious targets, we have got schemes like this, which will help us get there, is the belief. A large part of our manufacturing has also been to support and supply into the export market. Roughly about 25 billion US has been the amount for the FY23 in terms of exports. Now, as Manish also did mention this earlier, a significant amount or portion of the imports of PCBs and other components is coming in from overseas, and maybe a couple of jurisdictions are the more dominant suppliers, and that's where the need has been felt for augmenting India's capabilities in the component side. For example, it could be capacitors, resistors, insulators, inductor coils, and whatnot. And of course, PCBs is at the top of that list. Now, as we've seen in the past, there have been schemes, whether there was the the specs, or whether it was the large scale electronic PLI, or it was the IT hardware PLI, or the white goods PLI. There has been quite a good response from industry, and therefore we have this timely intervention that we are seeing by way of the scheme on hand. As we go into the scheme, the focus, of course, will remain on Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India, as has been the sort of call, and the system. The government of the day has actually been putting all its effort into these two initiatives for quite some time now, and this component manufacturing scheme will also go in that direction and bring in a lot more effort into making us Atmanirbhar Bharat, as also promoting the Make in India brand. So with that, I'd like to have Rituraj and Anand just walk us through the contours of the scheme, the operational guidelines, and the nuances that we should be aware of.
Thank you, Ranjit. Just taking note from Ranjit and Manish, currently, what government had done is that there was a Niti Aayog survey that was conducted to identify what are the problems or challenges for electronic components. Broadly in this space, there are 5 challenges that were highlighted. One is there is a high upfront capex, high investment turnover ratio, lack of scale, long gestation period, and catching up with technological advances. Now, considering these challenges in mind, the government has come up with these incentives to address some of these challenges. The objective is to develop the robust component manufacturing ecosystem, increase India's share in the exports, of these electronic component. The overall, again, the scheme is aligned to the government objective of Atmanirbhar Bharat and a Viksit Bharat by 2047. Of course, the scheme envisages an investment of roughly 59,350 crores rupees, with an aim to generate a production of approximately 4.56 lakh crores, and a direct employment of roughly around about 91,600 persons. So that's the overall objective about the scheme. The scheme has basically divided products into 4 different target segments, where government aims to provide a differentiated incentive for each of the segment. Broadly, it is sub-assemblies, which covers, display modules and camera modules, bare components or selected bare components, and supply chain ecosystem, and the capital equipment. So if you see the way the scheme is designed, they are not just looking at, assembly or the product. They want to create an entire ecosystem where our dependence on import for any of the components should get reduced. The scheme has an overall outlay of 22,919 crores. Broadly, the scheme offers three different types of incentive: turnover link incentive, which is computed as a percentage of the net incremental turnover; capex link incentive, which is again as a percentage of overall capex; and for certain product segments, there is a hybrid incentive, which is a mix of turnover link incentive as well as capex link incentive. From an eligibility perspective, the scheme covers both greenfield as well as brownfield projects. Of course, there are minimum thresholds in terms of investment or sales criteria. The other important aspect is the scheme it just doesn't look at the financial part of it. The government is intending to look at the technical part. If the company has global manufacturing capability, what is the technical capability of the company or the person who applies for the scheme. So those all parameters like global manufacturing, ESDM revenue, and technical and financial capability are also a key parameter for being eligible for these scheme. Broadly, the scheme is for a period of 6 years for turnover link incentive with a base year of 24-25, and there is a 1 year gestation period available for certain segments except for supply chain ecosystem and capital equipment. And capital link incentives is for capital link incentive, the tenure is for 5 years. Dhruva, you want to move to the next slide? So, in terms of target segments, sub-assemblies would typically cover display module sub-assembly, which is, used in mobiles, laptops, televisions, or any other electronic system. Camera module sub-assembly, this would again, in laptops, it will cover cameras, it will cover mobile as a segment. The next segment is bare component, which is non-surface mount devices, passive components, electromechanicals, which typically translate electrical signals into mechanical, and which will cover motors, sensors, switches, relays, actuators, multi-layer PCBs, lithium-ion cells for digital applications, enclosures for mobile IT hardware and related devices. Then for specific selected bare components like high density or flexible PCBs, surface mount devices, passive components, and the fourth segment is for supply chain ecosystem. So any parts or components that are required for manufacturing the products mentioned in first three segments, which is sub-assemblies, bare components, or selected bare components, even for those components or parts, there is are getting covered up. Then also what is covered is capital goods that are used in electronic manufacturing for any of these target segments. Those are also getting covered up in these. What does scheme also has given an illustrative list of products for certain specified target segments, like non-SMD passive components will include resistors, capacitors, specialty ceramics, inductors, coils. Like electromechanicals will cover speakers, microphone, relays, switches. But these are all illustrative lists. This is not an exhaustive list. So if our product qualifies to be in any of the target segments, then the applicant can apply for the scheme. Scheme has an overall outlay of 22,919 crore. This outlay is divided further into the segments. Of the 22,919 crore outlay, 21,093 crore is earmarked for target segments of A, B, C, which is sub-assemblies, bare components, and selected bare components. And roughly 1,700 crores is allocated for supply chain ecosystem and capital system. Within the target segments of sub-assemblies, bare components, and selected bare components, they have not given any specified allocation to any of these target segments, and they have stated that it will be fungible depending upon how they see the response of the industry to this scheme. So incentives under the scheme will be disbursed on a first come, first served basis, but there is an overall ceiling of roughly 50% of the applicant's cumulative incremental investment. Okay, but this ceiling is not applicable to additional incentives that are given for lithium ion cells and multi-layer PCBs. The incentives claims are to be filed within a period of 9 months from the end of the financial year. That's the outer limit. What are the incentives? We'll cover in the next slide for each of the, so for sub-assemblies like display module and camera module, there is a requirement of an investment of minimum investment of 250 crores. And the incentives ranges from 4 to 1%. So in year one, we have incentive percentage of 4 percentage based on incremental sales turnover. Year two, we'll have 4. Like on this goes on reducing to 1%. So if you see in all the categories, this is a front-ended scheme where maximum incentives are available in the initial years of starting the production. These incentives are dependent upon meeting the cumulative incremental threshold criteria of investment as well as sales. So we have to do overall at the end of 5 years, we have to meet the cumulative investment threshold criteria of 250 crores for display module and incremental sales criteria also on every year. Plus, there is another requirement of having an incremental employment. Having said this, if the applicant meets the threshold investment and sales criteria but doesn't meet the employment criteria, then only 1% of the incentive amount will be withheld, and that 1% will be released once the employment criteria is also being met. So for camera module, we have an investment criteria of 250 crores over a period of 5 years, and cumulative sales criteria at the end of 6 years should be 900 crores. Similarly, for non-SMD passive electromechanical component, the investment criteria is 50 crores. And sales criteria at the end of year 6 is 90 crores. Incentive is ranging from 8% to 4%. For multi-layer PCB with 6 layers, investment criteria is 50 crores. With a incremental sales at the end of year 6 is 90 crores, and incentive percentage starts from 6% and goes down to 4%. For multi-layer PCB with 8 layers, investment criteria is 50 crores. Sales criteria starting from 15 crores in year 1 to 90 crores in year 6. But there is an additional incremental incentives as compared to 6-layer multi-layer PCB. The incentive percentage is starting from 10% from year 1 and goes down to 5% in year 6. For lithium ion cells, which are used for digital applications, okay, except storage and mobility, the threshold investment is 500 crores to be done over a period of 5 years. Sales, incremental sales starts from 200 crores and goes on till 1200 crores in year 6. And incentive percentage from year 1 is 6 to 4% in year 6. Similarly, for enclosures of mobile IT hardware products, the threshold for investment is 500 crores, and incentive percentages start from 7% to 3% in year 6. For multi-layer PCBs, and lithium ion cells, there is an incremental incentive of 1% and 2% respectively if certain specified components are manufactured or sourced domestically. Now, for certain product segment, there are hybrid incentive, which is for HDI or flexible PCB, and similarly for SMD passive components, where the investment threshold criteria is 1,000 crore and incentive percentages varies from starts from 8% to 4%. In addition to these turnover-linked incentives, for HDI and flexible PCB, there is an incremental capex incentive of 25%. So even for capex incentive, if investment and sales threshold are met, but employment criteria is not met, then only 5% of 25% is being withheld and rest 20% will be disbursed. Now we have certain segments, which is supply chain ecosystem and capital equipment. There, the government is offering only a capex incentive, which is 25%, subject to and meeting the threshold criteria of 10 crores and an employment criteria of 10 persons per crore of investment. So now, what are the qualification criteria for anyone to apply and get selected for the scheme? There are general conditions that are applicable to all applicants. There are certain conditions that applies only to specified target segments. So general condition is basically both greenfield and brownfield expansions will get covered up. There has to be a separate application for each target segment. Only one applications are allowed. If the applicant is already claiming an incentive from the government of Bharat under any other scheme, those investments that have been counted towards incentive schemes of the government, those incentives or investments will not be counted in this scheme. There is one more welcome, move where, government has specified is that in case an applicant had applied for an earlier scheme called specs, but that application could not be further processed on account of budgetary limitations at the government end, those applications will also be considered if the applicant meets the qualification and eligibility criteria in this ECMS scheme. There is, in case an applicant desires to, have a JV partner or a foreign JV partner, the foreign direct investment should be as per the, for FDI rules that the government has floated. For target segments like, device display module or maybe a camera module, which is sub-assemblies, bare components or selected bare components, the companies or their joint ventures have to meet the criteria of either the criteria of a global consolidated ESDM revenue or a manufacturing revenue for financial year 23-24. If these are not being met, then the applicant may not get selected. And if the applicant meets the manufacturing revenue criteria but does not meet the ESDM criteria, then his application can still be considered if he demonstrates that they have the requisite technological capability by way of documentary evidence like in-house R&D facility or a binding term sheet with a technology partner or a technology transfer agreement. Then those applications can still be considered. If there is applicant is a JV between an Indian partner or an overseas partner, then the JV of the turnover of the JV will be considered basis the weighted average, proportion computed as per the shareholding pattern of the Indian promoter as well as the JV partner. These numbers are to be computed basis the financial year and not the basis the calendar year. For target segment D, which is supply chain ecosystem and capital goods segment, the criteria is that the net worth should be more than 50% of the proposed investment, and these have to be certified by the statutory auditor. If the net worth conditions are not being met, then a board resolution committing the required investments along with details of funding sources are to be submitted along with the application. I'll now hand it over to Rituraj to discuss the incentive eligibility criteria and the application process.
Thank you, Anand. Good afternoon, everyone. So we already looked at the premise of the scheme and also the benefits or incentives which are available under the scheme. Now let's look at one of the critical areas, which is incentive eligibility criteria. Now it's very important to understand one thing is that getting an approval under the scheme is one thing and it's an important step. But the scheme guidelines are very clear that just because I have an approval under the scheme doesn't mean that I will get the incentive. For me to receive incentive under the scheme, it is essential that all the eligibility criteria are met on a year-on-year basis, and only then will incentive be disbursed to the applicant, which has received an approval under the scheme. If we look at the incentive criteria, basically these can be grouped into 5 categories. One is general conditions. Then we have some investment related parameters. We have parameters which are dealing with sales, parameters to deal with incremental employment, And finally, there are some segment-specific conditions which have also been prescribed in the scheme guidelines. So let's look at each of these parameters and eligibility criteria on a one-on-one basis. Firstly, starting with the general eligibility. Primary condition for getting incentive claim or becoming eligible for getting incentive claim is that the applicant shall meet the threshold criteria, be it the threshold of investment, threshold of sales, or threshold of employment. So first, I have to meet all the three or all the applicable thresholds in order to become eligible for any incentive scheme. One important point here is that the manufacturing through a contract manufacturing model, a pure play contract manufacturing model is not eligible. The idea is very clear that the applicant has to undertake the manufacture on his own. Of course, some level of third-party support in form of a job work is allowed. However, the significant part of the manufacturing has to be undertaken by the applicant. This is one of the conditions. Also, it may so happen that this is a scheme which will go on for 6 years. You will be filing claims for incentives for the period of from 1 year to 5 years, and in one of the years the condition for, let's say, the investment or sales may not be fulfilled. So if I have not been eligible to claim incentive in one of the years, that doesn't debar me from claiming or lodging the claim for the subsequent years. So if in the subsequent year the relevant criteria are fulfilled, then very much the applicant can go ahead and file the claim for incentive. Again, as Anand earlier mentioned, investments and sales, which are already factored for other central government schemes like PEX or PLI, cannot be double counted for claiming benefit under the current scheme. Moving to investment related parameters, the first and obvious parameter is that the investment must meet the cumulative incremental investment thresholds, which we just looked at. So for each of the category, there are different investments thresholds which have been laid out. So those investment thresholds have to be met. That is one of the conditions. Now here, I just wanted to highlight one practical point. As Anand mentioned that, looking at the type of investment, a lot of time these could be front loaded. So it could happen that the entire investment happens or gets completed in the initial couple of years itself, and you don't have to get it into different tranches. Now, as of now, this scheme is not speaking about it. We have seen, previous PLIs, for example, the white goods PLI, which specifically mentions that front-loading investment will be considered as eligible or for the purposes of claim. So even if in the subsequent years I don't have an incremental investment, that will be that's okay. I'll still be eligible to get a claim of incentive. That is one aspect which has not been clarified in the scheme or the guidelines. And that's for this could be one area which will require some clarification from the government side. Coming to what are the eligible capital expenditure areas. So the typical ones like plant and machinery, equipment, tools, jigs, fixtures, associated utilities which are required. So the HVAC system, the effluent treatment plant, the captive power plant, expenses related to all of these will be considered as eligible. Any expenditure incurred for R&D and product development facilities will be considered as eligible. Also, IT and ERP infrastructure, which is linked to the manufacturing, will also be considered as an eligible expenditure as a part of investment. Very important point that land and building costs are specifically excluded. So any expenditure that is incurred for land building will not be counted toward the eligible investment threshold. Likewise, the expenditure for raw material, consumables, etc., will also not be considered as eligible. Expenditure like freight, insurance, erection, commissioning of plant and machinery will be allowed. However, that comes with a cap of 7.5% of the basic cost. The scheme specifically allows use of second-hand or refurbished plant and machinery also, provided that the plant and machinery which is being used has a useful life of at least 5 years, and the value of that plant and machinery and the useful life is duly certified by a chartered engineer. As for timelines of the investment, so for the target segments A, B, and C, which we covered earlier, the investments which are undertaken after notification of the scheme, that is, investments which are undertaken from 8th of April 25 will be counted as eligible investment. On the other hand, for capex linked scheme, the target segment D, the investments which are undertaken after acknowledgement of the application will be counted, and investments made for the 5 years from the application acknowledgement will be counted for the purposes of eligible investment. For deciding what is the date of investment, the date of invoice for procurement of particular plant and machinery or whichever eligible item will be considered, and the same has to be capitalized in the books of the company, and a fixed asset register has to be maintained by the applicant, as well as there's a requirement that all the eligible assets have to be specifically tagged. Moving on to sales related parameters. Now, first of all, the sales parameters or the sales thresholds which have been laid out for each of the segment have to be duly fulfilled. The sale must be related to the manufactured goods of the target segment. The date of sale will typically be the date of invoice and date of dispatch, along with the revenue recognition. So if we have any scenario where I have raised an invoice and revenue for the same has not been recognized in a particular financial year, then those invoices will not be included in the current year's turnover or the relevant year's turnover, and it will be considered in the subsequent period when the revenue is actually recognized. Any sales returns which have happened will have to be adjusted against the gross sales for the year in order to arrive at the sales to count whether the sales have met the parameter or not. And if there are entities which are dealing with manufactured goods as well as traded goods, they are required to maintain separate books of accounts to ensure that manufactured goods related turnover is identified easily. One of the important objective of the scheme is to generate incremental employment. If we see the press release also, which came for the scheme, it categorically mentioned that this scheme is likely to generate new jobs of upwards of 91,000. So therefore, the portion of incentives is tied to achieving that cumulative incremental employment. So if I don't meet the employment threshold, then certain portion of the incentive will be withheld by the government. Now, how do I compute the incremental employment? So in case of turnover linked scheme, the incremental employment will be computed on the basis of difference between the base year's employment vis-a-vis the claim period employment. So whatever is the difference between these two will be considered as an incremental employment. On the other hand, for capex linked schemes, the manner of computation of incremental employment is slightly different. In here, the any 12 consecutive months average after the commencement of production will be compared with 12 months period prior to acknowledgement of the application, and the difference between these two will be considered as incremental employment. The average employment figures will be based on 12 months employment levels. All the employees, including direct employees as well as contractual employees, will be considered or will be counted for determining the cumulative incremental employment. However, the same will have to be backed by the EPFO records, and casual laborers or apprentice and that type of resources will not be counted towards the cumulative incremental employment. Now, these were the initial parameters. Now, there are some specific target segment specific conditions. Now, if we see the target segment specific condition, typically talk about the manufacturing process or localization aspect or some technical details of the products. Now, firstly, if we look at the display module sub-assembly, the specific parameter is that complete process like film on glass, chip on glass must be undertaken in India. So only final assembly from imported semi-assembled goods is not eligible. So likewise, in case of camera module sub-assembly also, complete process, including the surface mounting, front line, front of line, end of line, all these activities have to be undertaken in India by the applicant. Only final assembly of semi-finished goods is not eligible. So the intent of the government and the scheme is very, very clear. They're not looking at a pure play simple assembly. They want the applicant to undertake the specific value addition in India to really achieve the objective. In case of multi-layered PCBs, one requirement is that from the second year onwards, at least one component has to be localized, meaning out of all the components that I'm using for manufacturing, from the second year onward, I have to go on and start procuring that item locally rather than importing it. So I could either manufacture it on my own, or I could make sure that it is manufactured in India and procure such item. If, let's say, there is a situation where more than one item is localized in 1 year itself, then it can be carried forward for benefit or for the purpose of counting in the subsequent year. In case of lithium ion cells, first of all, lithium ion cells manufactured should be for digital application only. And the capacity of these cells must not exceed 1000 mAh. From the second year onwards, again, like we saw in case of multi-layered PCB, even in case of lithium ion cells, it is required that from the second year onwards, at least one part, be it the electrolyte, electrode, cathode, whatever the case may be, must be localized each year. In case of enclosures for mobiles, IT hardware, etc., there are two requirements. One is that manufacturing must involve processing of metals, plastic, or glass, and finishing and decoration must be a part of manufacturing process. So the final finishing of that product has to happen as a part of manufacturing process, which is undertaken by the applicant. Over and above this, there are a few more target segment specific conditions. Now, first, again, we have for lithium ion. Now, if I have a situation where the applicant has manufacturing setup, which manufacture lithium ion cells for both digital and non-digital applications, then the investment and employment number will have to be used on a pro rata basis. So whichever portion or how much ever portion is allocable to the digital application, that will be counted for the purposes of scheme eligibility. Now, if we have a situation where there is an applicant who's manufacturing multi-layer PCB as well as HDI PCBs, and he has received an approval under multi-layered PCB parameter, then the turnover of HDI PCBs will also be counted as far as turnover is concerned, but the incentive rates which are applicable for multi-layer PCB will be applicable in that scenario. Now, as far as localization requirements are concerned, there are some really important points or parameters for eligibility for lithium ions as well as multi-layer PCBs. First, like I mentioned earlier, the applicants may localize part during the incentive, anytime during the incentive year. If the localization exceeds then more than one part, then that additional localization which you've done for other part can be carried forward for benefit in the subsequent year. The localization date will be the date of the first sale invoice, which is manufactured for the product which is manufactured using these localized component. And the last point, which is very important, is that after a particular component has been localized, the benefit will be allowed only for the product which are used or which are manufactured using localized components. So basically, I cannot have a situation where I've localized a particular component in a particular year, and then I go back and start procuring that item internationally. So once you have localized a particular component on a go forward basis, the same product will have to be necessarily procured within India. So this is an important parameter. Again, there could be situation where capital equipments may have a dual use. So, for example, same applicant may be manufacturing multi-layered PCBs, HDIs, MSAP, or different products, and same capital goods are being used across these applications. Now, for this, they have given a very logical basis. What they have mentioned is that if the full value of equipment, or if the full equipment is being used for a specific product, then entire capital expenditure will be allotted to that specific segment. And if there is if a capital equipment is being used for multiple products, then on a proportionate basis, the capital expenditure will be allocated. Now, so these were the eligibility criteria for claiming the incentive. Now, moving on to the application process. Okay, the whole application process under the scheme is expected to happen online. They have already created an online portal, and all the applications must be submitted through this online portal. As far as the application window goes, the applications for sub-assemblies, bare components, and selected bare components, which is basically category A, B, and C, the applications start day after tomorrow on the 1st of May. And the application window is open for the period of 3 months. So from 1st May to 31st of July is the period when an application can be made for sub-assemblies, bare components, and selected bare components. As far as the supply chain ecosystem is concerned, which is basically components required for manufacturing these sub-assemblies or capital equipments, the window is larger. So the window opens again on 1st of May, but it is open for the period of 2 years. So the applicant under that category, they have a larger time to make an application. Now, there are some specific requirements which will have to be adhered to when I'm filing an application under the scheme. So when I file the application, the target segment and the product has to be specifically mentioned. Only one application is allowed per product, and separate application has to be submitted for each target product. So if there is an applicant who is manufacturing 3 eligible products, then 3 separate applications will have to be filed under the scheme. Along with the application, the proposed investments, the overall manufacturing plan, the project location, timelines for investment, sales milestone, details of employment generation plans will have to be incorporated as a part of application. The financial capacity documents like the financials, the net worth certificates, etc., will have to accompany the application. Proof of technology capability. So we earlier mentioned that if I do not meet the ESDM revenue parameter, then also the application can sail through on the basis of technological capability. So if I fall under that category, then proof of technological capability will have to be incorporated as a part of the application process documents. Now, the application will have to have, they have specified different fees for different target segments, ranging from 2 lakhs to 5 lakhs. So typically for lithium sales, high density, so HDI, enclosures of mobile, etc., they have allocated a fee of 5 lakh, whereas for earlier other products like non-MSD, electromechanics, the parts components used for manufacturing sub-assemblies, capital goods, etc., the fee is in the range of 2 lakh per application. So let me repeat this, that if an applicant is manufacturing or intends to manufacture more than one product, eligible product, then separate application will have to be made for each product type. And all these application fees are non-refundable in nature. Now, coming to the process of application. So the application, so the guideline typically mentions that the project management agency will examine all the applications that come in to the portal. The first screening will happen for completeness of the application. If the application is complete in all aspects, if all the requisite documents are available, then the PMA will issue an acknowledgement letter. The indicated timeline for that is 15 days. If any application is found to be incomplete, if there are some documents which are missing, then the PMA will communicate those gaps and different, additional documents which are required to be provided. And the applicant will have to submit those additional documents in a span of 15 days. Once an application is found to be proper, the PMA will issue something called as a unique application ID, and that will be like a reference for all the further communication. After that, the PMA will appraise and recommend. So the PMA will do the preliminary evaluation of the application and give a recommendation to the governing council. The governing council also will review technological and financial capability of the applicants, and thereafter the final recommendation will be given to the competent authority. Now, competent authority will be the final authority which will approve the applications. The competent authority will depend on how much is the volume of incentive. So if the incentive amount is up to 100 crore, then the competent authority or the final sanction authority will be the Secretary of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. If the incentive amount is above 100 crore, then the competent authority will be the Honorable Minister himself, and that's how the approval process will get completed. The approval letter will be issued to successful applicant at the end of the process. Now, as I was mentioning, the approval process is one major milestone, and after that, on a year-on-year basis, the applicants will have to continue to fulfill eligibility criteria, eligibility parameters, complete the investments, ensure that the sales turnover is up to the mark, and then make a separate claim on a year-on-year basis for disbursement of incentives. So for disbursement of incentive, the applicants must submit an incentive claim through again the online portal. The claim must be accompanied by certificate of investment in case of capex, certificate of sales in case of turnover, certificate of employment, etc., and other documents as will be prescribed. The claim will be verified by the PMA. PMA will appraise the claim and recommend disbursement, and the ministry will release incentive payment to the approved applicants directly. And the payments will obviously be subject to a satisfactory appraisal, budget availability, and compliance with the scheme guidelines. It is very clear that the disbursement will happen on a first come first serve basis. So as I was mentioning earlier, that just because I have an approval doesn't automatically guarantee that I will get an incentive claim. So meeting the conditions and making the claim in a right way is the key for ensuring that all the requisite incentives are duly disbursed to the company. And the calculation for incentives will be again fairly obvious, that in case of turnover linked incentives, the incentive will be computed as a percentage of net incremental turnover. And net incremental turnover will be basically the turnover for the claim period minus turnover of the base year being 24-25. And 1% of the incentive will be subject to meeting the employment thresholds. Likewise, in case of capex linked incentive, the incentive computation will be based on the prescribed percentage into eligible incremental capex. And again, the 5% of the claim can be withheld if I do not meet the incremental employment thresholds. Right. So this is what we wanted to cover as far as the scheme is concerned. Now, before we close and before we open the floor for question and answers, the fact that there are some other schemes also which are available. So, while ECMS is obviously a very important scheme, and many of us will make sure or explore this scheme and try and see whether organizations are eligible under the scheme or not. At the same time, it's important for anybody who is going for further investments, for expansions, for diversifications. It is important to acknowledge and take cognizance of the fact that there are several other pre-existing schemes, and those also have to be factored when you're going in for a new investment. So, I mean, we don't want to spend a lot of time. We'll just quickly, want to cover it up in 2-3 slides only. So, one is typically the state incentive schemes. Across India, different states offer state incentive schemes, which are again linked to investment commitment. So the way in case of ECMS, we have investment as one of the criteria. Likewise, states also offer a number of benefits depending on the investment commitment. Typically, the investment are segment agnostic, so it is not necessary that my investment has to be in a specific segment. But again, if I'm under the electronic component manufacturing domain, then also I can very much open myself to other state incentives, which can parallelly be claimed. So typically, the benefit which the state's incentive scheme give is in form of investment subsidy, which is typically the reimbursement of SGST component of the sales which have happened. The objectives of the scheme are again to ensure that there's industrial growth, there's a balanced growth in a particular state. Additionally, apart from the investment subsidy, the state incentive also offer benefits like electricity duty exemption, stamp duty exemptions, etc. And by and large, these schemes cover greenfield as well as brownfield projects, industrial parks, logistics parks, warehouse parks, etc. So these are also some schemes which one needs to keep in mind when you're looking at any diversification or investment. On the screen, what you can see are typically, this is only an illustrative list of some of the states, the kind of benefits that they offer. So for example, if you're looking at Karnataka, based on the investment, there would be a 10 to 25% of a capital subsidy that one can expect. Again, there could be a stamp duty waiver, there could be electricity duty waiver, etc. So any applicant who's looking at ECMS should also parallelly look at all other avenues which are available. One more scheme which we thought we'll just briefly touch upon as a part of this session is the mover scheme. Again, this is nothing new. This has been there in vogue since last few years. And the whole idea of this scheme is to promote manufacturing activity in India. And again, this is one scheme which is not necessarily export oriented. So typically, we see that a lot of schemes that are there are export oriented, but this is one scheme which incentivizes manufacture within India. It doesn't matter whether your target market is in India or outside India. This is basically a working capital incentivizing scheme. It gives benefit in form of deferment of customs duties. So under this scheme, any company who is setting up or getting a license under mover can import capital goods or raw materials without upfront payment of customs duties. In case of capital goods, the customs duties get deferred till the time those capital goods are within the mover premises. In case of raw material, the customs duty become payable whenever the finished goods are cleared in the domestic market. If the capital goods or the finished goods are exported, then entire duties are remitted. So this is again a wonderful scheme by the central government, which is designed, again, it is a segment agnostic. It can be availed by anyone. This is a single point approval. There's no geographical restriction. It is applicable for new as well as existing setups. So these are also some of the scheme which should be kept in mind when we are looking at any expansion. All right. So that's it from our side. Now we are happy to take any questions. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions about ECMS, and we are happy to take those up.
Thank you so much, Ruturaj, for that insightful presentation. We already have some requests on the chat box if the presentation can be shared with the participants. Also, there are some of the questions, but I think let's open the floor for discussions. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand or put it in the chat box. Yes, Mr. Shah.
Yeah, this is Chaitrali here. I'm representing SFS India. My question to you is, how about the applications that were approved under the spec scheme, but because of the budget constraints, it didn't go ahead. So the investments and everything, how is it calculated in this particular new scheme? And my second question here is, we manufacture micro fasteners which are used in mobile applications, hardwares, HDDs, laptops, anywhere in electronic components. So whether our product is eligible in the part D, that is the ecosystem.
So Chaitrali, regarding the first question, I think, hello.
Yes.
So regarding your question with respect to eligibility of the products that are being manufactured. Now, if you see in target segment D, they have clearly specified that if you are manufacturing any part or component that is used in the manufacture of the other target segment, then it will get covered up. So if you say that if your product that you are manufacturing is used in the manufacturing process of electromechanical equipment or non-SMD component,
Yeah.
then you will fall under target segment D.
Okay.
Just to add to what Anand said, if you look at the annexures which are provided as a part of the scheme also, while they have named a certain product, they categorically mention that this is only an illustrative list, and what they intend to cover is that any component which is used in be it display, camera module. So basically, in any category A, B, C, if my product can go as a component, then that very much be covered as a part of segment B.
Okay.
Chaitrali, can you again repeat your first question? Probably, I think I missed that.
Yeah, my first question was that earlier we had received an approval, the eligibility approval under specs. However, it did not go through for the final approval. We had received an acknowledgement. So, under the new scheme, For the application, what all process or what all exemptions we would get?
So I believe what I understand is you had applied for specs but were not able to claim the incentive because of the budgetary restrictions at the government end, right?
Right, right.
Then if we are meeting the the qualification criteria and the eligibility criteria, when I say qualification in terms of the ESDM revenue, okay, or similarly the eligibility criteria for incentives, then you will still be eligible for this scheme. Now, there is one more question that comes up is that if you have already made the investments, okay, whether those investments will still be counted. So there is, if I had made the application investment post receipt of the acknowledgement under specs, okay,
Mm.
then those investment will also get considered here.
Okay. Yeah, that was my precise question. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Ashish Priyadarshi.
Yeah, hi. One question I have that
Sorry, can you briefly introduce yourself? Where are you? Which organization are you from?
yeah, so I'm Ashish Priyadarshi. I work for Dixon Technology. My question is that JV partnerships are allowed for the seeking PLI incentive. However, is there any criteria on the percentage of JV shareholding pattern? That how much should be the shareholding of the Indian company and how much should be for the foreign company?
So there is no specific restriction on the shareholding pattern. The only thing the scheme specifies is that in case there is a foreign investment, okay, then the investment should be as per the FDI norms.
Okay,
Now, the only benefit is that if you are having a JV company, then in terms of meeting the criteria, which is ESDM revenue and manufacturing revenue, okay, you can take the benefit of your JV company's turnover prorated to the shareholding.
okay. Okay. And in that case, incentive will be gone to both foreign entity and the
So
Indian entity.
incentive will go to the applicant. I believe you are
Okay.
forming a JV company where your foreign partner and Dixon will make a investment.
Okay. Okay. So the entire JV as entity won't get the benefit. Only the Dixon part of this shareholding will get the benefit.
No. So incentive again. So when there are two parameters to be looked at. Incentive computation is based on the turnover or investment that your JV company in India does. The where the foreign company as well as the Indian company has made an investment and created a specific company for that one. Okay.
Okay.
Now for a qualification criteria, okay, to see that whether the applicant, which is the JV company in India, whether it is meeting the qualification criteria in terms of ESDM revenue or manufacturing revenue.
Understood. Understood.
That
Understood.
criteria will your JV companies outside India turnover could also be helped.
Understood. I have one more question regarding the old equipment. That old equipments with the aging of 5 years are allowed as a capex. But how we will determine the fair value of the old equipment to conclude the capex? Is there any way to do that?
They have referred to the custom valuation rules there.
Okay.
They've referred to custom valuation rules, and in case of domestic procurement, they have mentioned that it will have to be backed by a chartered engineer or certificate.
Okay. Understood. Thanks. Thanks for that.
Hi, I'm Sanjeev Jindal from Cosmo First Limited. I have a question about uh, employment generation. In category 8D, supply chain ecosystem and capital equipment, if I have to put up a plant valuing at around 250 crore rupees, am I supposed to generate an employment of 2,500 people? For every 1 crore of investment, they're writing 10 people are to be employed.
Yes.
So these days the plants are so advanced and automatic. Very less employment is required. How can one employ 2,500 people for by putting up 250 crore rupees worth of project?
So probably, sir, what we'll have to do is that in your cases, probably if you're not meeting the criteria, then at least you'll not get 5% of the capex incentive. Okay, you will still get 20%. But it's always advisable that we make a representation to this effect to the government, and ultimately it is the GC Council will take a call on this one.
Another question, follow-up question on this is, they are writing protective film, contrast film, polarizer film. What exactly is the meaning of protective film? In electronics, I am not able to understand what is being referred to as protective film.
Uh, I guess, sir, we'll have to check that and get back to you on this one. But the point is, if your product is falling under category D, the list that they have given is only indicative list. In these the parts and component space or electromechanical or SMD space, they have not given an exhaustive list as yet. So if we are confident that our product is falling in that one, we make an application, and they will review the application process, they will study the details, of course they'll look at the usage part of it and then select.
This question was very specific because we are getting a PLI benefit for making metallized film for capacitor. And for making metallized film for capacitor, the base film is BOPP film, which is nothing but can be said as a protective film. I'm taking that definition too far. Protective film, I'm referring to as a BOPP film, from which we are making the metallized film for capacitor. At this moment of time, all people who are making metallized film for capacitor in India, they are importing that film from China. So we are putting up a plant here in India to make that BOPP film. So that's why I'm asking this question, whether that protective film or contrast film or the polarizer film, can that be taken as a BOP film, or we have to go back to the GC council and understand what they are referring to this as a protective film?
The point is, can we say that the product that you are manufacturing, proposed to manufacture, would it being used in the manufacture of any of the parts or components referred in target segment A to C?
No.
Okay. So then also, sir, there is a specific provision where we may apply and give the details. And even if it is not specifically listed, the GC, the governing council of the scheme, they can take a call whether or not to give the incentive or not. They have made this specifically. There is provision in the operational guidelines for this.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sanjeev Keskar. Okay, sorry.
No, please go ahead. I was calling your name only.
Okay, thanks, Purtika. This is Sanjeev Keskar from Arvind Consultancy. I'm actually reached out by many MSMEs. And if you look at SPECS program, the threshold was 5 crore rupees. And now for passive components, be it non-SMD, then it is 50 crore. And if it is SMD, it is 250 crore, which is way too high for any MSME company to participate. Actually, electromechanicals and non-SMD component is the segment where the MSME can play a big role. Secondly, you have given an approval window only 3 months. Even if the passive components are not high tech as semiconductor, still there is no indigenous technology for capacitor like MLCC or for inductors or for any other latching relay. You have to have a global technology partner, and in 3 months no one able to really establish a global technology partnership and submit a proposal. So I think 2 points. Firstly, the 50 crore and 250 crore limits are way too high for passive component. Secondly, the 3 months window for application is too short a window. If you look at SPECS program, the window was 3 years and the investment limit was 5 crore. And again, for non-SMT component, why there is no capex incentive? Why there is only turnover link incentive? These are the questions we should be asking to people, because even for 50 crore investment for non-SMD, if we get 25% incentive, it will be beneficial to MSMEs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sanjeev,
Agreed, sir. So what we can do is, these are all points of representation broadly.
Yeah.
While with your second point in terms of timelines for application, what they have said is, as of now, they have come up with this 3 months timeline. But depending upon the response under the target segment, they may still extend the timelines. They have done it in some other PLI schemes like, specialties steel PLI, which was initially launched in first week of Jan, but the timeline got extended. Okay. But I agree, there are certain points which needs to be represented. Maybe a representation along with FICCI can be done on these claims specifically for the MSME related aspect.
Thank you, because we were expecting it should be specs 2, like specs 1, but this is not specs 2. This is meant for only the big companies.
So you can send us your points. We'll just discuss it, how to take it up. So
Sure,
yeah,
Purtila ji. I will send you.
sure. Mr. Kunal Tyagi.
Hi. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very enlightening. I just had like 3 questions. I'll put them to you very quickly. First of all, regarding
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Tyagi. Can you please mention where are you from?
yeah, so I'm a public policy professional. I work at Coan Advisory, so which is in New Delhi. So my question essentially for the first one is, so there has been media reportage around how the treatment of Chinese firms will be in when it comes to JVs, and they're talking about setting specific or special rules in dealing with Chinese companies forming JVs with Indian companies. If you could shed some light on that. Secondly, I wanted to ask whether double dipping is possible. Specifically, for example, I'll take the example of PLI IT hardware, wherein there are localization schedules for additional incentives being offered for localization of components and sub-assemblies. There's a whole list of components and sub-assemblies that's there already. Will companies be able to avail both of them? And thirdly, if you could clarify the part on capital goods, dual use capital goods again, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Kunal. So coming to your first question with respect to Chinese investment, currently this scheme per se does not provide for any specific restriction in case of there is a foreign participation in the applicant company. What it simply says is, all the foreign participation in terms of equity in the applicant company should be as per the FDI norms. Probably what news reports that you are referring to could be that they may have to modify some FDI related norms there. So if there is a specific norm in FDI, more specifically for Chinese related aspect, then those needs to be met with for any applicant to qualify under this scheme. Okay.
Right.
With respect to your question on double dipping, the scheme clearly says that if you had committed an investment under any of the earlier PLI schemes, that investment will not be counted for computing the investment threshold condition under this scheme. Which means if I'm availing a benefit under any of the earlier PLI, I can still claim the benefit in this PLI. Okay, provided I am making a fresh investment which is not considered for counting the investment in the earlier PLI.
Okay.
With respect to your third question, I think it was with respect to dual usage. Rituja, you want to speak on that one?
Yeah, sure. So see, as far as dual usage, basically what they have acknowledged as a part of the scheme is that if there is an applicant who is manufacturing, let's say HDI, MSAP, flexible PCBs, etc., there could be many capital equipments which will be having dual applications. So it will be used for both HDI, flexible PCBs, etc. So in such case, what they've mentioned is that, and let's say you're filing an application under both the categories, then depending on, so the capital equipment will be counted for both the applications. If there is something which is exclusively used for any of these categories, then it will be only considered in the relevant application. Otherwise, it will be considered in both the applications. And also they have talked about investment which are made toward capital equipment, which have exclusions, like I mentioned, for manufacturing HDI, flexible and proportionate capacity of capital equipment having dual use will be considered for computation of the CapEx incentives.
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rohit Kumar Singh.
Hi, thanks, Furtika. Thank you, Anand, for putting this presentation. I have one suggestion and 3 to 4 questions. The first suggestion would be that probably as FICCI, we should consolidate some questions and submit it to METI in order to put it across as an FAQ, so that larger part of the questions which are not addressed in the guidelines or probably a little bit tricky to understand could be understand well in FAQ. So the first request would be like this. Anand, my first question to you would be that how are we going to calculate the incentive? Though the threshold limits are very clear, but let me put a scenario here. Let's say I do an investment of 1,000 crore, against which I have to generate a revenue of 1,200 crore in 6 years. Now, what if I generate a revenue of 1,800 or 2,000 crores? How will I be getting the incentive? Will I be eligible for an incentive over 1,200 crores, or will I be eligible over incentive of 1,800 crores?
Okay. So, sir, first of all, to answer, there is an overall cap on the incentive, okay, which says that it cannot exceed 50% of your overall cumulative investments. Okay. Now, we have to keep this in mind. Now, if we say that one, the computation is if I have a, say, a turnover of, say, 200 crore in the base year, which is 24-25. And in year 6, if I achieve an 1,800 crore ka turnover, basis what the reading of the operational guidelines on the differential amount, I'll get the incentive at the applicable rates, which is 1,800 minus 200.
Okay. So I'll be getting an additional incentive over the base rates which are applicable over the delta amount which I have achieved.
Subject to overall ceiling limit of the incentives that have
Yes,
already
yes,
been
of course.
claimed.
To the cumulative investment ceiling limit of 50%.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Just
on
to add to what you said, so basically the 1,200 is the threshold, minimum threshold. So they are
yes.
not limiting it, or that's not the cap. I can very much go beyond it, and delta between my base turnover and claim period turnover will be factored for the purpose of computation of incentive.
Perfect. I was of the same understanding, but I definitely wanted to clear the air. So my second question is regarding one of the clause 4.2 of the scheme guideline, which talks about the gestation period. Now, in the gestation period, if you look, there are 2 years which have been given, either 25-26 or 26-27. Now, if you go through that, it says the applicant may choose either one of the year as first year of incentive, right? Now, I have a doubt here that whether it should be the first year of incentive or first year of investment, because if you are bringing new investments in the country, let's say on the high end PCBs or something like that, then you definitely need some time in order to invest. And if my first year is 25-26, that means I have already invested in the previous period. So it can never be 25-26 at any point of time. But for 26-27 also, my first year would be 25-26. And the immediate sale could not be achieved on those parameters. Because, you know, the ratio of asset to turn, which is given over there, is 1:1, which is quite, I would particularly talk about the segment C, where 1:1 ratio is there. So it will be difficult to achieve there.
So I'll just take this question, sir. I mean, just want to moving a step back in terms of how the scheme works and the tenure it is being there. There are 2 aspects. One is the base year that is to be considered for, computation of either an incremental investment or incremental sales turnover. And then there is a tenure of the incentive period. Okay. So if I take base year as FY 24-25, okay, then, and if I'm applying for this policy, so in year one, I have to complete the investment that has been specified and also achieve the sales turnover, incremental sales turnover, for me to claim the incentive for financial year one, which is if I take the base year as FY 24-25, then I have to do the investment also in 25-26 and also achieve the incremental sale turnover in FY 25-26 for me to be eligible to claim an incentive for financial year 25-26. Okay. Alternatively, for target segments A, B, and C, I have an option that I may defer my base year by 1 year, which is the gestation period. Instead of 24-25, I take my base year as FY 25-26. Okay. In which case, if I take my 25-26 as a base year, then in FY 26-27, I have to do that investment in turnover as well as achieve the incremental sales target for me to claim the incentive for FY 26-27, which would be my first year of incentive. Now, practically, if I, typically if there is a new setup that is coming up, okay, if I take base year of 24-25, typically plants require a 1 year time to get a setup and completely operational. Okay. So FY 26, I'll make the investment, but I will not be able to achieve the incremental sales turnover. So I lose on 1 year of my incentive period in this case.
Exactly. That was what my point was, that if there is a new applicant, let's say, so it may lose on the incentive for the first year. So uh, whether it should or should not be in place of first year of incentive, rather it should have been first year of investment. Because in all the other 14 PLI, if you see, this is the first PLI which says or earmarks the word first year of incentive vis-a-vis all the 14 PLI saying first year of investment.
So I would tend to agree, but I'll just want to add here something. I may alternatively choose FY 25-26 as a base year. Okay. And then probably there is still some clarification that would be required is because if I do a front loading of investments,
Yeah.
what it says is basically if I do investments in FY 25-26, because most of my investment will happen when I'm setting a new plant in year one itself. Okay. And I may not do the investment in subsequent years. Then should I be eligible for the incentive scheme? That is something that needs to be clarified by the government. But in the past PLIs, they had allowed such kind of a concept because what the policy says is that investment that are incurred after the announcement of these policies will still be considered for computing the overall investment threshold. So we may have to look at FY 26 as a base year, but do that investment, front loading of that investment, but we'll still have to wait for a clarification from the government that if a front loading of investment happens, would I still be eligible for an incentive? Which should be given the intent, but it has to come up in black and white from the government authorities.
Yeah.
Just want
Another
to
very
add,
interesting point, Anand, which you
just
sorry,
wanted to add one
sorry,
point.
yeah.
If we look at clause 2.15 of the scheme, which talks about gestation period, it very explicitly clarifies that if you choose 25-26 as your gestation period, then any investment that you made during this period will be considered as eligible investment. If you happen to have any turnover during this period, then that will not be counted. So if you read 2.15 with the 4.2 clause, which says that 26-27 will be my first year of incentive, what they're basically trying to say is that because I may take time in putting in my investment, I can choose 25-26 year to be the year in which I carry out the investment. That investment in that gestation period will be counted toward my capex, and then in 26-27 become my first year of incentive.
Yes, Rituraj, the only thing is I'm doing a front loading of
Yes.
investment. In those cases, I should
So
be
that
eligible.
clarity is required. Yeah, that is very much required. Like we have in case of white goods, we don't have it in this scheme.
Correct. That's what the intent was.
Yeah.
Now, another very interesting point which you brought, I think it was related to guideline point number 10, 10.2 something, regarding this localization of the components. So, on the part of the localization of component, it is very well understood that when you do some part of the localization of the component going forward from the first year, then that has to be integrated with the target segment, and then you will get the benefit on the localized component basis year on year, whatever the localization of one part, second part, third part you are doing.
Right.
Now, let's say that in the first year, I do the localization and I avail the incentives. In the second year, I may not be able to do that localization of that particular component or the second level of the component in house, or probably procure it locally. Because let's put a hypothetical situation that the demand for that particular target segment increased, and the player from whom I was procuring, or myself, if I am producing, not able to cater that, in that case, I will have to lapse for that particular year's incentive.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we see
So,
10.2.4, that's what seems to be the intent, that they've categorically mentioned that once a part or a component is localized, thereafter the manufacturer target segment goods sale shall only be considered eligible for incentive if such localized parts have been used. So if for whatever practical, as of now, as the scheme and the guideline has been put up, as of now, they have not given or offered any flexibility for factoring these practical nuances.
yes, Ritu. And why I say so is with the background. I'll just take a very little example, 10
Um,
seconds. It's regarding the copper parts, which we recently saw in PLI white goods, though that is not directly linked. But let's say in this particular PLI scheme, it is linked. Now, if there is no local capacity which is available or adequate local capacity available, then the entire industry is in a fix.
Agreed, sir. So in such cases, probably again the route is to do a representation, and I'm sure government would also want to make this scheme as a success. So if there is no, domestic manufacturer who is doing that or who has done that, okay, then probably the only route is to represent to the government to relax these norms.
Sure, sir. I'll stop here. Purtika is already.
Yeah, so we'll move to Mr. Anil Goyal because he's been, wanting to ask a question since quite some time now. Mr. Anil Goyal, please
Yeah,
introduce yourself.
thank you for the opportunities. And first of all, it's a nice presentation. And I'm from Secure Meters Limited, Jaipur, and we are coming for a PCB plant in Bhopal. So my question is related to the localization. So is it mandatory for the full incentive, or is it mandatory for the additional incentive of 1%? That is one question. Second question is related to suppose I'm already doing a localization of the component. So again, I need to do further localization of the like chemicals or all this for the incentives, or so only the first localization is sufficient for the further incentives. So these are the two my questions.
So see,
So, yeah, Rudra, you want to answer this?
yeah. So see, if you look at, there are two things. One is there are some target segment specific conditions which they have provided. So for, let's say, multi-layer PCB, for my first eligibility itself, I have to make sure that from the second year onwards, I am doing at least localization of one component, be it process chemistry material or a finished chemistry material, as the case may be. Right. So this is not for the added benefit. This is my primary target segment specific condition. Now, if you have already done localization of some of the parts, and if you are manufacturing or setting up this new plant, I believe as of now, while the scheme is not specifying anything about it, they are talking about incremental localization anyway. So when we will put up our application about what is my product manufacturing process, at that point in time, I will be giving declarations about my source of products, etc. So whatever is already domestic, I think the intent is to ensure that there is more localization. So I would believe that they're talking about incremental localization and not only limiting to the existing localization which has already happened.
Okay. Okay. Actually,
I think I just wanted to add probably one is that they are just looking at one of the component, not the entire components being getting localized. Okay.
One each year.
One, I think, yeah, from the second year, at least one component should get localized.
Mike, actually, suppose first year, because there is no condition in first year. Suppose I localize 5 component in first year. Okay, then so I can get the benefit of next 5 years, the same localization without
Yes.
any further localization.
Yes,
Yes,
that is
you
very
can get.
much mentioned that if you do more localization any of the years, then you will be able to carry forward the excess to subsequent years. That's very clear.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Sanjeev
Okay.
Keskar, you have a
Yeah,
question?
one last question. First of all, thank you very much. This was very informative session. Appreciate you are taking us through the detailed policy. My quick question is, Minister Sir last week talked about the companies should be Six Sigma qualified to be eligible for incentive, but it is not mentioned anywhere in the guideline. So can you please clarify that point? And second question is about the capex incentive, whether it is on reimbursement basis or pari passu basis.
Sir, I'll take your second question first. It is on reimbursement basis. You incur and then claim this as an incentive.
Okay.
Okay. And as you rightly pointed out, that Six Sigma is not
the one which
specifically
is
termed out.
left.
Is not specifically termed out, but if you look at the way the numbers
on
are
which we are
compiled at, okay, in terms of investment or whether it is ESDM revenue or manufacturing revenue, I'm sure they are taking into consideration if company of such a scale will be compliant with these things. But having said this, there is
so
no
this way
specific
you consider.
requirement
These
of
are the
Six Sigma given in the policy itself.
Okay. Thank you.
Rohit, do you have another question, or are there any other questions in the chat box also?
Purtika, I had one last
Like,
question. That's regarding the apprenticeship part. Now, all of us probably will be hiring this NAPs. So, what should we do with them? That was the first question. And the follow-up question, or I would say attached question to that was that we all must be using the contract labors. Now, in that case, the contract person whom we hire does the EPFO part for them. Now, how that accountability needs to be fixed onto the applicants who are going there in this application and scheme.
Right. So, as far as cumulative incremental employment is concerned, while as far as apprentices is concerned, you are right in saying that, eventually, automatically, you will have number of apprentices coming on board. But and that's perhaps also because of the nature of industry. But categorically, they have excluded that from the scope of counting incremental employment. So while you may continue to have apprentice on board for functionality requirement, that will not be counted. That's very much mentioned. Again, if you believe that this should be a part of representation, because given the nature of industry, there necessarily would be apprentice type of resources being deployed, then that can be a fair point to be added as a part of advocacy. As far as contractual employees are concerned, they have very much said that employees on your rolls as well as contractual employees will be counted towards the incremental employment. Only thing is the EPFO record. So when we are talking about, like you rightly said, the EPFO related compliances for the contractual employees will be undertaken by the contractor. So those records will have to be accompanied by, the EPFO records maintained by the applicant as well as EPFO compliance undertaken by the by the contractor will have to be clubbed in and put together as record as a part of the application.
As a part of the, I think, disbursement claim applications.
As a part of disbursement claim application, not the initial application.
So this is Dr. Satpathy from BHL. I have a small question. Is that this lithium-ion cells for digital applications? Can you give some specific example? Because as far as I know, the lithium-ion cells mainly for the storage and the e-mobility kind of things. Because we have a facility, we manufacture space-grade lithium-ion cells. So I just want to understand what are the specific kind of products you're talking. Give me 2 or 3 examples so that I'll get an idea of that.
So what we have, what the scheme specifically mentions is that the lithium-ion cells for digital application and excluding storage and mobility. So lithium-ion cells for storage and mobility will be excluded. But what would qualify as a digital application? I think that's a technical point, and we'll have to probably look at that and get back to you.
So just to add, Rituraj, here is that lithium-ion cells typically it could be laptop batteries or a mobile batteries related kind of a scenario if you do some research. So probably that seems to be the intent.
But sir, that will cover under the storage.
And
Because
mobility.
you are storing the energy and consuming it. So that's what I want to understand. What is digital separately? That's why.
I think details within. Then I think MITI has to. We'll have to write to MITI and get those clarifications.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you,
Excluding
sir.
storage.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions do we have? And if there are no more questions, then I think we can just come to the conclude this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining this session. It was very informative. And a special thank you to the team from Dhruva Advisors for taking up all the questions, answering them. And yeah, just one request: if like this presentation can be shared, and if a copy can be shared with all the members.
Yeah. So we'll share it with you, Pratika. You can then mail it across to your respective members.
Okay. So thank you so much, Anand. Thank you so much, Rituraj, for joining us. Can we have a group photograph if everyone can on their camera? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.